Ponte Vicks. That was the answer to everything growing up. Headache, Ponte Vicks. Stomachache, Ponte Vicks. Sore muscles, Ponte Vicks. Crying too much at a funeral, Ponte Vicks y tienes que serte fuerte. Except nobody told us what to do when the Vicks stopped working. A ver, vecino, let's sit down for this one. Make sure to grab your cafecito. And welcome to episode 9 of the Entre Mundos Podcast. This is a space for bicultural Latinos navigating life between cultures. Y aquí hablamos de cultura, identidad, mental health, family expectations, and what it means to honor your roots without losing yourself. For those of you that are new here, I'm John Eli, your bicultural vecino who understands cultura y psychology. I work as a trauma-informed counselor and nervous system educator, but more than that, I'm someone who has lived in this in-between space his whole life. This podcast is my way of putting language to what a lot of us carry but don't know how to say. Now, before we get in deeper into today's conversation, I want to offer a quick reminder. This podcast is not therapy, and it's not a replacement for therapy. This space is for reflection and conversation. Mejor, think of it as a plática con tu vecino favorito. All right, ahora sí, let's talk. A ver, most of us grew up hearing some version of this. Tenemos que ser fuertes. We have to be strong. And on the surface, this sounds like encouragement, like someone believing in you, like resilience, like your people refusing to be broken. And honestly, in a lot of ways, it's all of those things. Latino families have survived things that most people will never have to face. Migration, poverty, loss, discrimination, labor that broke bodies, circumstances that had no easy answers. And in the middle of all of that, tenemos que ser fuertes was how families kept going. It was survival dressed up as philosophy, and that deserves respect. But here's what I want to talk about today. What happens when that philosophy stops being something we choose and starts being something that we can't turn off? When being strong stops meaning we can handle hard things and starts meaning we're not allowed to feel them. I want to tell you about my dad. My dad was a hard man, and not hard in a cruel way, hard in a way that men of his generation and his circumstances learned to be. Solid, unmovable, always working, always providing, and emotionally sealed. Mira, I never saw my dad cry, not once. Not when his siblings died, not when my brother was in a horrible accident that could have taken him from us, not whenever my maternal grandmother died, not when my grandpa died. He just kept going. He showed up, he stayed functional, and he kept the family moving forward. And I used to wonder about that as a kid. How does a person watch the people they love disappear from this world and not fall apart? I know the answer now. He wasn't strong in the way that I used to think. He was doing what his nervous system learned long before I was born. Keep going, stay numb, don't stop moving, because somewhere along the way, someone taught him that feeling things was a luxury that he couldn't afford. And he passed that down the only way parents pass things down, not by explaining it, but by living it out in front of us. Y mira, here's the thing though. I didn't inherit that. Soy chillón. I cry at funerals, I cry at movies, I cry when something moves me, I cry when I'm proud of someone, I cry whenever I'm overwhelmed. Mira, I feel things deeply, and for most of my life, that was treated like a problem. My dad struggled with my emotions, family members struggled with my emotions, I've had people close to me who couldn't hold space for what they saw coming from me, people who loved me and genuinely loved me, but couldn't understand why a man, especially a Mexican man, would feel things so openly. People who told me, just get over it. And when you've already grown up in a culture that tells you that your emotions are too much, hearing that from someone close to you doesn't just sting. It confirms everything that you were already afraid was true, that something is wrong with you, that you feel too much, that the Vicks isn't working because you're the problem. Because here's what this is what emotional suppression actually does. It doesn't make the feelings go away, it just teaches them to find somewhere else to live. We find it in the body, in the shoulders, in the chest, in the jaw, in the stomach that's always tight, in the sleep that never feels restful, in the anger that shows up when what you actually are feeling is grief. A lot of us walk around carrying the emotions that we were never allowed to experience. Grief that never got to be grief, fear that got dressed up as anger, sadness that turned into silence. Then we wonder why we're exhausted. We wonder why certain things hit harder than they should. We wonder why we react in ways that don't match the moment. And it's not because something is wrong with us, it's because we were taught to be strong before we were taught to be human. And then something happens. We step into American spaces, college classrooms, professional environments, therapy culture, wellness conversations, and for the first time, someone gives us a different message. Feel your feelings, name your emotions. Vulnerability is strength. You go, Brene Brown. Emotional intelligence is a skill. Processing your pain is how you heal. And then something within us exhales because finally, someone is speaking a language that matches what we've been carrying our whole lives. So we learn it. We read the books, we take the classes, we go to therapy. We get really good at understanding what we feel and why we feel it and what it means. But then we go home for the holidays, and none of it is safe to practice there. You try to name what you're feeling and somebody laughs. You try to set an emotional boundary and someone calls you dramático. You try to have a real conversation about something that hurts you, and the room goes quiet in that specific way that tells you, we don't do that here. No somos así. And so now you're sitting at the dinner table, emotionally bilingual, fluent in the language of feelings, but unable to speak it in the room where you need to speak it the most. You know what you feel. You know what it needs. You know what healthy looks like. And you still can't let it out where it matters most. Mira, that's not a personal failure. That's what it feels to live entre mundos, to carry two completely different sets of rules in the same body at the same time. One world taught you that emotions are information. The other world taught you that emotions are weakness. And you're standing between them trying to figure out what room you're in before you decide how much of yourself you're allowed to be. I want to be honest with you about something. I battled anxiety most of my life. And I have trauma responses to certain triggers that show up in ways that I don't always get to choose. And for a long time, I was surrounded by people who saw those responses and said, hey, John, you need to get over it. Not out of cruelty, but out of their own limitations, out of a culture that never taught them how to sit with someone else's pain without trying to fix it or silence it. And here's what I want you to hear. Being told to get over it when your nervous system is doing exactly what it learned to do, that's not just uncomfortable. That's abandonment. Not intentional abandonment, not malicious either, but abandonment nonetheless. And a lot of us have been abandoned in that specific way more times than we can count by people who loved us and who still couldn't hold us. I want to tell you about a moment that changed something in me. Several years back, I was at a funeral, someone young, someone who was taken suddenly and violently in a way that made no sense and left everyone around her trying to find solid ground, but that wasn't there. She left behind 4 beautiful children. I remember being there. The grief in that room was not quiet grief. It was the kind of grief that sits in your throat and in your chest and your whole body all at once. And in the middle of all of that, the matriarch of the family looked at the adults in the room and said, Tenemos que ser fuertes para las niñas. And in that moment, I felt something rise up in me, something that had been building for a long time. Every funeral where I was told to hold it together, every moment where my emotions were too much, every time I watched someone I loved go numb because that's what strength looked like, and I stood up and I said, no, we aren't going to stop crying. This is sad. Y las niñas tienen que saber que tienen permiso de llorar por su madre. It got quiet. And then the matriarch, this woman who had just told us to be strong, she looked at me. I could see something shift in her face. And she let herself cry because it was her granddaughter that was there in the casket. And she had been holding it in for everyone else in the room before she ever thought of giving herself permission to express her emotions. That moment taught me something I already knew in my head, but that I finally felt in my body. Strength is not the absence of grief. Strength is being present enough to feel it and still stay in the room. So let me ask you something. What if being strong enough to feel is actually stronger than being strong enough to suppress? What if the bravest thing a person in that room could do wasn't to stop crying, but to cry in front of 4 children who needed to know that losing their mother was worth falling apart over? What if being fuerte was never supposed to mean don't feel? What if somewhere along the way it just got translated wrong? Here's what I've come to understand. The resilience of our cultura is real. The ability to keep going through the impossible circumstances, that's not nothing. That's something to be proud of. But there's a version of strength that costs too much. The version that says never cry, never ask for help, never let them see you struggle, never need anything. That's not strength. That's survival dressed up as strength. Real strength, the kind that actually sustains you. Se ve diferente. It looks like feeling your grief without being destroyed by it. It looks like asking for help without feeling like you failed. It looks like letting the people around you sit with their discomfort when your emotions make them uncomfortable instead of disappearing so that they can feel okay. Because here's the thing I learned about people who can't hold space for your emotion. That's their work to do, not yours. The only other option we have is to lose ourselves. I refuse to do that. Y yo tampoco te lo recomiendo. That doesn't mean falling apart in every room. It doesn't mean processing every emotion out loud with everyone around you. It means knowing the difference between rooms that are safe and the rooms that aren't, and not punishing yourself for needing both to exist. It means finding the spaces, the people, the moments where you can actually feel what you've been carrying. It means bringing the emotional intelligence you learn in those American spaces back to yourself first before you try to bring it to the rooms that aren't ready for it yet. And it means understanding that whenever someone tells you to get over it, that says everything about their capacity and nothing about your worth. You weren't too much. You were just in the wrong room. So I want to leave you with this. Think about the emotions you were taught were not allowed. Not just in words, but in what you watched. What did the adults around you do with their grief, with their fear, with their pain? And then ask yourself, is there a version of emotional intelligence you've learned that you've never felt safe enough to bring home? What would it feel like to give yourself permission to feel it? Even if only in a room by yourself, with your cafecito, and nobody watching. You don't have to fix anything today. Just notice. Because you can honor the strength of everyone who came before you and still decide that you deserve to feel. That's not weakness. That's what healing looks like. Entre Mundos. Mira, vecino. If this is something you're actively working through, I put together a free boundaries guide specifically for bicultural vecinos. Specifically for bicultural Latinos. It walks you through how to start using your voice without feeling like you're losing your people. And you can find it on my Substack, and the link is in the description. And if this is something that you've experienced, know that you're not the only one. These are conversations many of us have lived, but never have had the space to talk about. So if someone came to your mind while you were listening today, compártelo. Send them this episode, porque sometimes hearing something said out loud can make a difference. Oye, before I let you go, every Monday I drop a new episode right here on Entre Mundos. And every Tuesday over on Substack, I take the topic we talked about and go deeper into it. The psychology, the cultural layer of all of it. Think of the podcast as a conversation and the article as where we sit down with it. So if today's episode opened up something for you, the article drops mañana. The link is in the description. If you want to continue this conversation, you can always find me on Substack, TikTok, and Instagram under Entre Mundos Collective. And of course, don't forget to tell all your vecinos about your favorite bicultural vecino who understands cultura y psychology. Well, until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your people, and keep honoring your roots without losing yourself. Un abrazote fuerte. Hasta luego. Bye.